To start replacing this window regulator, we have to take the door panel off, and I'm going to start right here at the door handle. You see that little cover? That's going to have to come off. I'm going to use a pick and just pry it out. Behind you see a Phillips head screw. You can also use a 10mm, so that's what I'm going to use. Remove that. And then right inside this door pocket, you'll see the same thing, a little cap. Pop this up. Another 10mm / Phillips head screw. Remove that as well. With that screw out of the way, you can lift this up, flip it over, and disconnect it. There's two connectors, one for the mirror switch and the other one for the windows. Here you'll see two 10mm screws. Remove both of those. This one's a little longer. It's the main anchor bolt for your door. Now I'm going to put a plastic trim tool in here, and I'm trying to basically pry the door panel off of the door. There we go. It's just held on by push clips at this point. So pull it out, and now you can pull up on the door panel. That'll unlock it from the top of the door. Okay. Now on the back side, you can see these two cables that go to the door handle. Pop them out and disconnect them. One last thing at the bottom is this light. Unplug it. Now you can set the door panel aside. Now undo the wiring harness off of this panel using the trim tool and unplug the window motor. You might need a pocket screwdriver to help you pry the connector apart. Finish removing the harness and set it aside. Now remove all the 10mm bolts that go around this panel that hold it onto the door. I have one missing. And then remove these 4 that hold the regulator onto this panel. Then you can pry the panel off the door, and the only thing holding the window and the regulator on is the 3 bolts for the motor. So watch out, because the window does slide down now. And remove these 3 bolts now. Then the window, motor, and regulator will be free off of this panel. Finish removing them, and now you can take this panel and set it to the side out of your way. Pull the harness out and just move it so it's not in your way. Now remove these 2 bolts, also 10mm, that hold the window glass onto the regulator itself. Now you can push the glass up, and I like to just take it right out. That way it avoids it potentially falling down and breaking. So just move it to the side somewhere safe. Remove the regulator from the vehicle, and here you go. Here's your old regulator and motor. Now put the new one in, make sure it's going in the right direction. It has kind of a curve to it. Drop the window down into the door. Well, don't drop it, but be gentle with it. Make sure it lines up with the guides, the rubber on the sides, and it slides down in very smoothly. If not, it might be off track. Bring it down and match it up with the regulator. That way it can get bolted back up. And once it matches up with that side, I'm going to actually start the bolt in. That way it's secured and I don't have to worry about it falling out again. And line up the other side as well. You might have to push things around and wiggle. And now let's snug them both up. Put the wiring harness back through this panel. And I'm actually going to line up the motor with this panel first. And that's the last thing I took off, so that's the first thing I'm going to put back on. Line up all 3 of the bolts and snug them up. Make sure they're nice and tight. Now line up the panel with the door. You can see you can just lift the panel and the whole window and regulator goes up. I'm going to bolt up these 3 bottom bolts. That way it holds this panel in place for me. Now I'm grabbing the window, pulling it up. That way I can line up the 4 regulator bolts onto this panel. And I'm going to start all 4 of the bolts in before I tighten any of them up. Because if I tighten one, then it's all locked into place and I need it to move around. So once all 4 are in, snug them all up. And don't forget about these 2 here. And now I'm just going to start in all the other 10mm bolts that go around this panel, and I'm snugging them up as I go. That way the panel is nice and secure. Now with the ignition turned on and the switch plugged back in, I'm going to test the window. Everything works just fine. The battery's kind of low on this car, so that's why it's having trouble going up. But it does work, so that's perfect. I'm going to clean that up later. Now let's resecure the harness onto the door, or onto this panel here, and make sure that your light is plugged in as you reinstall the door panel. Now let's put on these 2 cables, the door handle and the lock. Make sure they're both snapped into place. That way they're nice and secure. Feed your wiring through for the switches. Line up the door panel at the top. Put it down into place and snap in all the push clips. The 2 main anchor bolts. And since I'm here, I might as well plug in the switches and put those back. this one up here, and the little cap. Perfect.